Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael. Today I'm going to show you how to pickle jalapeno peppers, and I've got a variety here. I've got some green ones and some red ones, and as a bonus I'm going to show you how to make those shelf stable in case you've got a lot of these. You can't eat them all at one time, so I'm going to show you how to can those, and we'll be using the water bath canning method today. So I've got about 2 pounds of peppers here. I'm going to start out with 1.5 pounds and just see where we go with it. You can increase the batch, double the size if you need to. How many ever jalapenos you have, you can definitely just put them in a jar, put them in the refrigerator and eat them just like that. But if you've got a lot of them and you've never water bath canned before, then stick with me, then I'm going to show you how to do that at the end. So let's get started. So I've got my canning jars over here, and I'm going to go ahead and put those into my water bath canner. I'm going to fill them up with water, fill up the canner so that the canner comes to 1 inch to 2 inches above the top of the jars. And I'm going to bring those up to about 180 degrees Fahrenheit and just let those stay warm while I'm working on everything else. Because what we want to do is we're going to have hot brine. We want to put that into warm jars. You don't want to take a chance on cracking the jars by shocking them, by putting them into cold jars. So I'm going to go ahead and heat these up, and I'll come back and we'll start working on our peppers. This is going to come together really quickly. Now, like I said, if you don't want to water bath can these, you can put these into any jar that you've got and just put them in the refrigerator, and you can eat on them as you need them. But if you've never water bath canned before, I'll put a link in the description box with some of the equipment and some of the processes that will, just the basics of water bath canning. And I'm going to go through those too with you a little bit today. So I'm going to put me some gloves on, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be working with your peppers and then touch your eyes or touch your mouth with that, because you'll only do that once and you'll never do that again. So if you're not sensitive to that, then definitely, if you don't want to wear gloves, you don't have to, but I don't want to take a chance on it. So I'm going to put the gloves on and we'll start working on the peppers. And with these, I'm just going to cut the end of it off just like that. And then I'm going to take these and cut these into slices, little ringlets. You can cut them however thick you like them. I'm going to cut them about that thick, about 1/4 inch. If you want to leave them whole, you can definitely put them that way. Just cut a slit down the side. That way the brine can get into the peppers, and that way they'll pickle nicely. Or if you want them thicker, you can definitely make them 1 inch thick, however you want to. So depending on however you cut them, when you pack them into your jar, you might get a little bit more, a little bit less than I'm going to get today. And every time you make these, you might get a little different numbers, because you can see here the different sizes of the jalapenos. Some of these are really small, and then I've got some larger ones here. So it just all depends on how many you've got, what size you cut the rings, and then we're going to put these into our jars. I'm going to continue to work on these, and we'll come back and we'll start making the brine. I've got my jalapenos cut up now. You can do one of two things. You can leave them just like this, or you can take them to the sink if you don't want a lot of the seeds in there, because that's where a lot of the heat is, and just give these a little rinse, and they'll wash some of those seeds out, and that way they won't be as hot. So definitely, however you want to do it. If you like the heat, then leave them like they are. But if you're a little sensitive to the heat, you can definitely take these, give them a little rinse under the sink. That'll wash some of those seeds away, and then you'll have some nice peppers here. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up now to make my brine. I'm going to put these into a bowl, and I'll be back and we'll get started. Now, I've got my jalapenos set to the side there. I've got a saucepan here, and with this we want to make sure we have something that's not going to be reactive, because we're going to be putting vinegar in there. So do not use aluminum, because it could put an off-putting taste into the food, and you definitely don't want that. So if you've got stainless steel, or if you've got a Dutch oven, or if you've got a ceramic pan or glass pan, definitely use that. Do not use aluminum, because it could react with the vinegar. So we'll get started with our vinegar. I've got 2 cups, or that's 480 milliliters, and that is a white distilled vinegar. And you want to make sure that you use the ones that you buy in the store, because the acidity level is going to be constant with that, and that needs to be 5%. If you make vinegar at home, you can't really control the acidity level in that. So definitely, while you're canning, make sure that you're getting the vinegar from the store that's been processed, and you're at 5% acidity. So I'm just going to put that into the bottom of my saucepan here. And we're going to use equal amounts of water with that. So I've got 2 cups of water, or that's 480 milliliters, and I'll put that into the saucepan as well. I've got 2 tablespoons of salt, and this is a pickling and canning salt. Whatever salt that you've got, you want to make sure that it does not have anything in the ingredients other than salts. A lot of the processed salts that you get have iodine in it, or they've got anti-caking agents. Do not use those when you are canning. Use the ones that just has an ingredient that has salt on it, and I've got 2 tablespoons, and I'm going to put that in. And then I've got 2 tablespoons of white granulated sugar. I just like the way this kind of balances everything out, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. That's 2 tablespoons of sugar. Now with this, we're just going to bring this up to a boil, and that's going to help dissolve the salt and the sugar with that. So we'll just give that a stir to combine. All right, my brine solution has come up to a boil now, and I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to go grab one of my jars, and we'll start filling our jalapenos. We'll be right back. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the canning process. So I've got some lids here, and I've got those in water, and I just brought those up just a little bit above room temperature. Back in the day when I was a kid, when we were having to do this, you had to boil these, and we don't do that anymore. So you don't really even have to warm them, but I just do that just to kind of get the process going a little bit. So these, I just brought them up above room temperature. So I've got some black peppercorns that I'll be putting into the jars. And then because I've got red jalapenos in there, I'm going to be putting in some of this Pickle Crisp in mine. If you just have the green ones, you can leave that out if you don't want to. I think that just makes everything say a little bit crispier. The red ones on the plants that I have are mature, so they are a little bit softer. The skin is not as thick as the green ones, so they might get a little bit softer in the jar. And especially if you're going to water bath can them, they might do that. But if you're just going to put them in the refrigerator and not go through the water bath canning process, you could probably eliminate the Pickle Crisp for that. The vinegar is going to break it down a little bit too, so definitely that'll be up to you. I'm going to put that in mine. And then I've got a little bit of oregano that I'll put into the bottom of the jars. And I've got some bay leaves here, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then I've got some garlic. And with that, I've just taken the outer skin off of those, and I've got those ready to go. So you're going to put one in each jar. So I've got 4 of them laying here, just in case I've got that many jars to go. So I'm going to go grab me a jar. We'll come back and we'll start packing in the jalapenos. All right, so I've got my jar here now, and we're going to pack our jars to where the food is within a 1/2 inch from the top. So I've got a tool here, and each one of these little markings on that, I put the link in the description box. What this is 1/4 of an inch. So if you put 2 of these in the jar, that'll give you an indication of where the food needs to come up to, and also the brine needs to come up to a 1/2 inch of the top of the jar. So to begin with, I'm going to start out, I'm going to put in 1 clove of garlic. Then I'm going to measure out 1/4 teaspoon of my black peppercorns here, and we'll put those in. And then I'm going to put in 1/2 teaspoon of dried oregano. All right, I've got my seasonings on the bottom of that now. I've still got my glove on my one hand, and I've got a funnel here, and I'm just going to go ahead and pack those jalapenos into the jar. And again, we're looking for that 1/2 inch space at the top, and I'm going to get those a little pressed down on that, and I can get a few more in there. Now I'm going to take my measuring spoon here and measure out 1/2 teaspoon for my Pickle Crisp. All right, I've got my brine solution now. I'm going to put that in and fill the jar up until we get to that 1/2 inch headspace on the top with our brine. All right, now we want to make sure that there's not any air pockets down in there, anything like that, because that could affect the spacing on that. And you can see maybe some of the bubbles coming up on the side of that. And we want to make sure that we get all of those to the top. We don't want any of that there where that could affect our 1/2 inch headspace. So with that, I'm going to give it one more test to see where we're at, and we've got that 1/2 inch headspace that we need. Now I've got that right headspace on that. I'm going to take a paper towel with some white vinegar. I'm going to grab one of these little pot holders, and I'm going to clean the mouth of the jar off. We want to make sure they get that nice and clean. We don't want any of that seasoning that could interfere with that lid from sealing. And that'll give you another check to make sure there's no chips or cracks in it of your jar. So once we get that clean, I'll take one of my magnetic tools that I have here. I'll put the link in the description box for that. We'll grab one of our lids. We'll put it on just like that. We'll get one of our rings. All right, I've got a hold of it with a pot holder here. I'm going to turn that till it stops turning, and then we want this to be fingertip tight. What that means is you just want to grab it and just give it a little bit of a twist on the top. This is ready to go back into the canner. I'm going to grab another jar, and I'll continue, and I'll let you know how many I get. And I'm going to put one of these with a bay leaf in it. So I've got a really small bay leaf here. Now, if you want to use a bigger one, then just break it in half. So with your bay leaf, just put that into the bottom of that, and then just continue filling your jar up with your jalapenos. All right, I've got my last jar filled up now, and I used every one of my jalapenos in there, and I used all of my brine up as well. So that worked out perfect for 4 jars. I'm going to put this in, and I'll come back and we'll talk about the processing time. All right, I've got my 4 jars in my canner now, and I've got that turned up on high. I want to bring that up to a rolling boil, not just a boil. I want a rolling boil. And when it comes to a rolling boil, I'll put the lid on it, and then I'll set the timer for 10 minutes. So with the pints, and you can also use half pints if you want to, the processing time is 10 minutes. And that is all based on your altitude. So where I'm at is below 1,001 feet. So that will be the 10-minute time. So I'll put the link in the description box below for the processing times at higher altitude. So you'll need to know where you're at so that you can process yours, and it adds like 5 minutes to each one of those based on where you're at. So mine, the basic one, if you're below 1,000 feet, is 10 minutes, and that needs to be a rolling boil. Now once the timer goes off at the 10 minutes, then we'll take the lid off of it. We will turn the energy off to the pan, whatever you've got it on. If you've got gas or electric, turn that off. We'll let that sit in the canner for 5 minutes just to acclimate a little bit, and I'll come back and I'll show you what we'll do next. I am back and my jars have processed, and I've got them out here on a rack, and I want these to cool down. These are extremely hot. Do not touch them. Be very aware of where you put these. If you've got prying hands, you definitely want to put these somewhere that somebody won't get burned if they touch them until they get cooled down. Oh, you just heard that little ping. If you've never canned before, you hear the little ping on the top. There it goes again. That's a good indication that you've got a good seal on those. So you've got some water on the top of those. Don't try to pull that off when you pull them up, because the jars are still trying to seal. Just lift them, that's 3. Lift them straight up out of the canner and then bring them over here. There's enough heat coming out of that that will evaporate all of that water that's on the top. So with that, I'm gonna let these cool down between 12 and 24 hours, and I'll come back and I'll talk about what we'll do in the last part. Stick with me. I am back and it's the next day, and my pickled jalapenos have cooled down. Let's take these rings off now. This is the only time you want to take these off. You don't want to take them off until they've actually cooled down. And they should just slide right off. They have loosened up a lot in the canning process. So look at that. We've got a nice jar of pickled jalapenos. We've got, see that garlic in there, and that bay leaf, and those peppercorns. This is going to be really delicious. So now we're going to test the lids. We want to make sure we've got the dimple that's down, and we do. That's a good indication we've got a good seal on that. And you want to grab it by the top just to make sure that that seal is down. It might be, I've picked them up maybe once or twice in my canning ventures and things, where you pick them up and you thought they were sealed and one side was open. So definitely test those to make sure that they are sealed. So I've taken the rings off all the other ones now. I just want to check them to make sure I've got good seals on them, and I do. Everything is nice and sealed up on these. So I got 4 good jars on these, all sealed up. So now that the rings are off, you don't put those back on when you store those on the can shelf. We're going to leave those off. And the reason you leave the rings off is if for some reason the seal on this breaks, and then there's enough pressure on the ring on the top, it could give you a false seal that it could have enough pressure on it that it could push it back on there. And at that point, you might have bacteria, that could be mold in there, you just don't know. So you never store your jars on the can shelf with the rings on them. You always leave them off. That way, if it does happen to pop off, it isn't going to go back on there again. You'll know when you pick it up, because it won't be attached to the jar. So that is a safety reason why we don't put the rings on those. Store those on the can shelf with the rings off, just like this. Now these are ready to go. Now if for some reason you have one that didn't seal, right now at this point you can put that one in the refrigerator, put the ring back on that one, and you can eat on that one. That one is still good to eat. But if you find one on the can shelf later on down the road and the seal has come loose on the lid, you throw that one out. You do not eat that one. That one is thrown away. But if you find one right now, when you're taking off the rings right after, within that first 24 hours, and it's not sealed, that's still okay to eat. You can put that in the refrigerator and eat that one. That one is still good. Now that we know that we've got a good seal on our jars, you want to wait at least a week before opening up one of these jars and eating them. That way, that gives it an opportunity for that to get nice and pickly. If you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, check out one of these other 2 videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment how your pickled jalapenos turned out. And if this was your first canning session, how did yours turn out? I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.